Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet of Portsmouth City Council. Just so people are aware, there's no fire alarm planned, so if it does ring, it's real. Please, can you meet with Queen Victoria? I think we all know how to use the microphones. So, shall we quickly run around and make sure that everybody knows who everybody is for the record? So, Anna, shall we start with you?
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
David Williams, Chief Executive.
Chris Ward, Director of Finance.
Peter Bell, City Solicitor.
Gerald Van Jackson, Leader of the Council and Chair of this committee. Chris?
Chris Atwell, Cabinet Member for Communities and Central Services.
Darren Sanders, Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness.
Councillor Steve Pitt, Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Economic Development.
Matthew Williamson, Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care.
I'm Kaz Lee Hunt, Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and City Development.
Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation.
Indeed. Councillor Jason Zachary, Cabinet Member for Safety in the Community.
Councillor George, Management Leader of the Portsmouth Independent.
Shall we start with Lee?
Lee Todd, Head of Marketing Communications Engagement.
Karolina Szczepaniak, Equalities and Diversity Officer.
Kimberly Barrett, Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Environment.
Christina Downey, Climate Change Officer.
Ian Fitchett, Electoral Services Manager.
Laura Betsworth, Head of Emergency Planning.
Catherine Ramsey, Culture, Leisure and Rig Services.
Martin Lavers, Assistant Director for Infrastructure.
James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Services.
James Harris, Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Excellent. Okay, we have apologies from Councillor Susie Horton, who hopes to be with us, but she's got to go and do a ribbon cutting, and then she hopes to come and join us then. Chris Ward says you've got to leave at 2:45. We may have got to the end by then, I hope, by Chris. 1:45, we'll definitely be done by then. Okay, James, as you're here, can I do a quick request? In the agendas, is it possible to number the reports? Because it is confusing to have an agenda where there's just a list of things and they're not numbered. So it would be very helpful in future if we could have the reports numbered 1 through, I think we got 10 in future. Thanks, James. Okay, so that was apologies for absence. Any other apologies we need to note, colleagues? No. Okay. Declarations of interest? No. Okay. Records of meeting on 21st of February and the 7th of March. Colleagues, are you happy with these minutes? Great. Thank you. Number 3, Hillsea Community Centre. James, are you going to launch in?
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you. So the report before you seeks to address the full council notice and motion that asks Councillor Pitt and Councillor Sanders to find a suitable location for a new community centre in the Hillsea ward and report back to Cabinet regarding the feasibility to open a new community centre in Hillsea. The report before you is the result of collaboration across directorates. The feasibility work utilised internal expertise and also took advantage of the opportunity to incorporate strands of work that either started or were underway during the same period of time. So, for example, the consultation on the Hillsea Lido, the consultation on the Hillsea Lodge site and the Youth Investment Fund bids in that area. I'd like to put on record a thank you on behalf of myself and Stephen Bailey for the work of Culture and Leisure colleagues James Daly and Catherine Ramsey, from the Strategy Unit Kelly Nash, from Regen Stuart Palmer, and from my own services Sarah Lindley, our Community Centre Manager, and the Quantity Surveyor team in Building Services, all of whom have had a part to play in bringing together the content. Cabinet have been briefed on the report, and briefing sessions have been held with Hillsey Ward members with invitation for group leaders. So I won't go through the report in detail, but instead just provide a brief overview and then update you on some points that have come out of the ward member briefings. The purpose of the report then is to provide Cabinet with information to inform the decision. The feasibility work within the report includes some description of community capacity and definitions of community centres. There's a demographic analysis for the Hillsey ward. There's an overview of the current facilities and previous facilities in the Hillsey ward. There's a list of PCC-owned sites and land, and there's also some indicative cost to build and operate a community centre. The officer's summary can be best captured in section 3.3, and it's an officer's view that the feasibility doesn't on the face of it support the need for a new community centre. The report highlights the capital cost to build a centre as well as the revenue requirements to operate a centre. The report highlights the potential for a already purpose-built community centre located in Howard Road to be brought back into active use. And Vivid, the building owner and dominant landlord in that area, have commissioned the services of Chichester Community Trust to develop a model to bring that centre back into use. And our conversations with Chichester Community Trust, in our conversations, we've encouraged them to talk to ward members about the work and the plans to do so. Vivid also remain committed to the working with PCC and its partners around the Youth Investment Fund for that building in that location. The report also highlights opportunities within the wards, particularly the Hillsey Lido consultation, which would include community room and space, and Hillsey Lodge, whilst the intention remains to create a housing development sensitive to the location, particularly with regard to adult social care neighbouring scheme. There is scope to consider in the feasibility a community room or space should Cabinet wish us to do so. The report also draws attention to discussions with existing building owners in Hillsey Ward, so for example Gatcombe House and the Rugby Club, and the positive conversations as a result, which have led them to consider using the community space and community rooms within those buildings and offering a preferential rate for the community to use them. And the officer recommendations, which are in section 2, just flow from all of that feasibility work. Just to update Cabinet, so since the report was written and as a result of the briefings with ward members and others, I can provide you with the following information. The first is that the census information used in the report draws from the 2011 census. We have cross-referenced that against the 2021 census, and there is no change to the characteristics outlined in the report. Stephen Bailey has pursued a discussion with Father Bob White regarding St Francis Church for the use of the church hall, and also Stephen and Kelly met with the head teacher of Portsmouth Grammar School to discuss the community access to Hillsey School playing fields, and those conversations were all positive and will continue. And we've also asked Vivid to clarify the position with regard to a community room at South Downs, and we'll share that answer with Hillsey Ward members when received. Other than that, the report is as it stands, and Catherine, who accompanies me, we're both happy to take questions.
Thanks, colleagues. Darren.
Thank you very much, Gerald. Firstly, I would like to thank the Portsmouth Independent Party, especially Councillor Russell Simpson, for bringing the motion that led us here in the first place. Because frankly, without that motion, this work would not have been done. And indeed, from the records, this is the first time this has been done for 20 years, which is when there was lost a significant amount of work looking at Hillsey. I'm going to say pretty much what I've said elsewhere in public. As a result of the work that's been done, it's pretty clear that there is no... Hillsey has a range of communities, which are all slightly different to each other. Hillsey's quite a disparate area. And so the idea of having one community centre, when there's so much that is available and so much that is underutilised in the ward, feels not the best use of time and particularly money. The costs outlined in the report of building the sort of community centre that we see at Fratton or we see at Milton is significant, and obviously construction costs will continue to rise probably as the years go by. So I think the idea of utilising existing space, and I particularly recommend the spaces at Gatcombe Park as well, which is now work, and the work that James has outlined with Father Bob and the churches in the area are significant. There is also a significant area of deprivation in the northwestern part of the ward, and that's why we've been working with Vivid and the Youth Investment Fund to see if we can bring that community centre back. That is not the sole answer, that is one of the answers. And also down the track we've got the Blue Lagoon as well. So I'm delighted that we've been able to do this work. There is no one answer to the question. This report outlines that and is a very realistic way of outlining it, and I recommend that we accept it. Thank you, Gerald.
Thanks very much indeed. Matthew and then Lee.
Thank you, Leader. And I'd like to echo the thanks to the Portsmouth Independents who brought this motion in the first place. I think it's actually, so I'm going to specifically talk about the Hilsey Lodge site, as obviously it was a adult social care residential care home previously. And it really did sort of bring to the fore in terms of the consultation and engagement that was done, that indeed people were content with that usage of the site, and it does appear as well that the people of the area are content with that being similar again. And I think one of the interesting issues about that site is it is next door to Russett's, which is a respite centre for people with learning disabilities, and it's also, and actually has some people who live there full time. So a community centre directly next door to that kind of facility will probably be inappropriate, because to be a successful community centre, of course, you want a community centre to be used all day and well into the evening as well on a 7-day basis, to make it viable and make it a really good thing for that community. So I think that that's the consultation responses as is in the paper in 5.3.2.2 is really positive, and I know as we and I look forward to the release of the full engagement results in the next few days. On the whole, I think Councillor Sanders has made that very good point about amenity in Hilsey wards. There is a lot of underutilisation, and to be honest, speaking of my own wards, for example, I think we would kill for the kind of things that are underutilised in Hilsey in my own ward, because a lot of our amenities are outside our wards because of the nature of it, outside the boundary. So to have the things that we are having that really positive engagement with, and I'd like to offer my thanks to James and all the people he noted in that engagement with bringing those things into use, back into use, and into more use for the people of Hilsey. So I think it's one of these things where we get a prompt to do something and then it's done really successfully and really well. And actually, what it's brought out is there's a lot more options for the people of Hilsey, rather than just one particular, spending an awful lot of money for one particular thing in one particular place. Whereas there's actually, through collaborative working, through a bit of vision and a bit of creativity, you can actually create more facilities for people in Hilsey for a fraction of the cost.
Thanks very much indeed, Matthew. Lee?
Yeah, I too want to congratulate Councillor Simpson and his group. I read that he was disappointed in the newspaper, but I don't think that he should be disappointed at all, because this is the start, and he's only been there a short while, and we've had no real advocacy for Hilsey. I think it was mentioned for something like 20 years. So this is a councillor looking at what's happened And obviously I presume the trigger for it was the street patrols that have been going up there by residents. And I find it ironic that the ward that was until recently the ward represented by the current Hampshire Police Crime Commissioner, he's now got residents on its streets doing the work of what would appear to be police or wardens. So, I mean, you know, at a time when we're seeing, we understand that PCSOs are down 28.7%. We hear all these wonderful things about the police recruiting, allegedly 625 more police, yet we see this antisocial behaviour apparently growing, and in particular in this case, around Hilsey. And so we have to congratulate Councillor Simpson for getting hold of this by the scruff of the neck, and his party for bringing this notice of motion. And I think it's really important that Hilsey has got a good advocate for it now, which is Councillor Simpson at the moment. And I think too that, as I say, he shouldn't be disappointed. The work that the office has done, a kind of stock take of what is in the area and available to people to utilise, is a starting point. And I don't doubt that as we go on through the years and we look at budgets next year, that his party will come forward with some kind of budgetary response to the need for the people of Hilsey there. And I would expect that in a year or two's time. But in the meantime, he's got an awful lot to work with, and he can help utilise the resources that the officers have identified. There are other places I know, as Councillor Winnington said, would kill for such a number of uses. But yes, but work with the police, keep on pushing the administration, and in the end, you will get there, Councillor Simpson. So well done from me.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy with this report, colleagues? Thank you very much indeed, and my thanks to all the councillors from Hilsey for coming together and working this through with us, and I know we'll be continuing to do work up on this after the elections as well. Okay, thanks very much indeed. Let's move on to widening participation in local democracy. Ian, welcome. Have you got anything we need to add to the report?
Not a massive amount. It's pretty much as it says in there. It's for information only. Sets out a bit of background on current voter turnout statistics, and then goes on to talk about our priorities at the moment, particularly raising awareness of new voter ID requirements, some of the messaging about that, materials being circulated, and also a lot of the work that's been undertaken currently by our electoral engagement officer, and trying to reach as many potential voters as we possibly can.
Thanks very much indeed, Ian. I think it would be helpful to have a report after the council elections to look to see what's happened in terms of turnouts with the new rules brought in, which look to seem as if they're designed to drive down voter turnout, not drive it up. But it would be useful to see that. It would be useful as well to have a count done at all the polling stations about the people who turn up, who want to vote, but who are refused the ability to do so because of the new rules, which are, I think, in my view, is completely unnecessary when the level of electoral fraud in that way is very, very, very small. Lee, and then can we move on?
Yeah,
no, Lee and Jason, and then...
Yeah, I know, I always have a lot to say, but this is a... Following right after you, I mean, that particular aspect of it is a hammer to crack a nut. I mean, it's not called for at all. But it has created a lot of work, extra work for the election services. And I pop in there from time to time with some postal votes and things that people have signed up to because they want to be able to vote, but they don't have photographic ID. I think last time I was in there, you told me something like 800 people had signed up for ID or not?
It's about between 200 and 250 at the moment.
Oh, you know, that's me. But anyway, people are doing it. But I can tell you too, you know, we go around on doorsteps a lot, talking to people and on the phone and so on. There are people saying to us, not droves, but certainly enough, saying to us, no, well, that's me, I'm not going to vote because I haven't got any photo ID. That's not fair, and it's not right, it's not equitable in our democratic society. We believe in a pencil and a piece of paper to decide. We don't want to go down the American route of deciding how people are elected. We've seen how that's done, but unfortunately the powers that be right now in our country have a different view. They want to suppress, they want to control, and they want to make elections go their way with moving boundaries and adjusting the way democracy works in this country. Well, I'll tell you what, people out there better wake up and smell the coffee, because this is just going to keep going on and on and on all the time that the current lot have their hands on power.
Thanks, Roger. Jason?
Thank you, Leader. I relish the opportunity to ask the election manager some questions on this particular report. If we go first of all to 5.1, you mentioned that there is an electoral engagement officer in place, and you stress about how the creation and development of that role is fundamental to driving participation and inclusivity up. A bit more, is that one of our more experienced officers? I'm not asking for names and such like. This person been in post for some time?
They started in January.
Oh, so it's a new post in effect. So how long do you expect before they're fully conversant? When do you think they'll be fully effective?
So they've hit the ground running, and they're doing a really good job, in my opinion, already. Obviously, it's a learning experience. You know, it's a pretty tough assignment to come into. It would be ordinarily in the run-up to an election in any case, but obviously with the new requirements added on top of that, that's quite a significant piece of work to be undertaken in such a short time. Ideally, obviously, we would have liked to have brought the post holder in sooner. That wasn't possible. So they're doing the best job that they can. Obviously, we're going to learn an awful lot from this experience, and we'll have to review that, take that forward, and see how we can improve going forward. But I would say they're doing a pretty impressive job so far, yeah.
Okay, just out of interest, how many people have you actually got in your team?
We, in total, have 6, of which the engagement officer started in January, and a new apprentice started about 4 weeks ago.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, where was I? 6.4. I'll be trying to be quick. You mentioned that working with the university has increased the number of students that are now included on the electoral register. It leaves it as that. It could be 1, it could be 1,000. A bit more information. How much has it increased it by?
Don't have precise numbers with me to hand, but what we've started doing a number of years ago was working with the university to get a page inserted into the academic enrolment process. So we get something like 7,000 names through from that means alone, which is 7,000 names that we wouldn't otherwise have got so easily, for sure. A lot of students register in the same way as any other resident. They receive the same paperwork through every summer. A number of them respond to that in the same way. It's a difficult thing to measure precisely, I think would be the thing to say there. But certainly that 6,000 to 7,000 that we get from the enrolment stage is really encouraging. It's given us a route in as well. We have some communication with the local halls of residence. It gives us another avenue to be able to distribute materials to.
Okay, and on the final point, Lee's already touched on it. It'd be useful if this could come back at some stage, either to Cabinet or full Council. And under 8.1, you've mentioned that it will be reviewed and evaluated. I just wondered if you had any kind of idea of the time scale for that.
I think this sort of work is constantly going to be reviewed and evaluated. That's just an ongoing permanent thing. There's always something changing in terms of the electoral cycle, in terms of new requirements such as voter ID. I think Leader suggested bringing something back post-election with a sort of some evaluation of how voter ID has actually worked out at these elections. So I think that would be a good time to, after the election, to sit down and have a look at what we did and how that worked, and what aspects that we'd want to develop further, and perhaps some that didn't work so well, and how we could make them work. So I would say, after the election is an ideal time to do that.
Thank you for your professional opinion. In regards to after the election, are we talking, how long do you think you'd need? A month, 2 months?
I think we'd probably be looking June/July to be able to fully digest what's happened, see what the statistics are telling us about turnout, and to sort of undertake some feedback exercises ourselves. So to go back out, to talk to some of the groups and understand what their thoughts are. So I would think perhaps July might be about the right time to be able to collect that.
Okay, thank you, Leader, and perhaps we can make an out ourselves as a Cabinet to have something on the schedule for sometime July or August. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Okay, colleagues, you happy with the report? Thank you very much indeed. Member Champion Annual Update. James, Lee, anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Leader. Nothing to add to the published report.
Colleagues, you happy to accept the report? Thank you very... Oh, Chris?
Just, if you don't mind, Leader, I'd like to thank the team for compiling all the reports, and to thank the champions for their work. It's in addition to ward and cabinet responsibilities. And I personally am very keen on Councillor Hunt's mission to list Central Library. I suspect you might have a different view on that. But well done to all the champions for the work they do out with their normal duties.
And may I say, Leader, I'm really pleased to have Lucy Howard, who's been appointed, who knows her stuff, and she's offered to give me assistance towards making the building completely listed.
Okay, and let's move on. Development of Equalities and Diversity Strategy. Oh no, we need to say that. Accept the what's it called? The Champions Annual Updates, and it's actually useful to have something in writing. So thank you, and thank you for everybody who wrote them, who may not have been the champions. So thank you very much indeed. Development of Equalities and Diversity Strategy. Lee, hello.
Not much to add beyond
Excellent.
what's in the report. Just thought it's worth drawing your attention to the piece of work that was done with sort of external stakeholders. We worked with the voluntary and community sector to run a couple of workshops attended by 28 people, and then an online survey that got 263 respondents to inform what the priorities of the communities affected by this strategy will be. And aside from that, the bulk of the rest of the work is an assessment of the council's current arrangements and how those can be improved. But if anyone's got any questions, happy to.
Well, thanks. I thought it was a useful report, but I think basing decisions on 263 responses from a city with a population of 215,000 is. I'm sure they're sensible things, but they can't in any way be thought of as representative.
No, the context of that is it was a piece of work to inform the initial approaches, working with, as I say, those that are sort of most directly affected by this. And the report says in there that the draft strategy will come to Cabinet for endorsement, and once you're happy with, it will go out for a full consultation with the entire city.
Okay. Chris?
Thank you, Leader. My thanks for the report. It's sort of a kind of, we're on the way to producing the strategy a bit later on in the year, so it's a kind of where we're at the moment. I want to thank Carolina, who's here, the Equalities, Diversity, Inclusion Officer. We started from pretty much nothing, actually, and Carolina's brought a lot of energy and passion to this piece of work, and James, who was here previously. So I want to thank you, Carolina, as you're here publicly, for not only what you've done, but how you do it. And I know that you do things outside normal office hours, and you go to events and you engage with people all over the city. So it's a really, thank you for the report. I'm looking forward to the strategy a bit later on. I'm glad we're working to the LGA's framework on these things. It's something I've been very keen for us to be able to measure our progress. While I've got the mic, I want to highlight our achieving status on commissioning and procurement, which gives me an opportunity to thank the Director of Corporate Services, who's also in the room today, for leading the core social value team to a gold award in public transformation service award a couple of weeks ago. So there's lots of really good stuff going on in the EDI space, and there's lots more to do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? No? Are we happy with this? Thank you very much indeed. PFI, way forward. Martin.
Thank you, Leader. This is a report for noting, and I'll keep it fairly brief for the
Excellent.
summary. But it is the stuff that excites me, highways maintenance. So it's actually quite an important time. We're about to enter the first of 7 years before the end of the PFI. And what the paper summarises is the importance of the timeline going forward, and very briefly, what we're going to do before the 31st of March 2030 is a process of going through contractual handback, handover of assets and preparation for post-PFI arrangements. So that 7 years is a timeline that meets the DFT and IPA Infrastructure Projects Authority's own guidance in the preparation for PFI expiry. So the handing back the assets, that's a contractual term. It makes what we have to do is ensure that the condition of the roads, the bridges, light columns, etc., are adequate to be handed back. So that requires inspections and assessments and things like that. That requires resources and funding to be able to do that. There is also the handover phase, which is where we're looking at returning some of the highways assets before the end of the contract, so we don't just simply drop off a cliff on the 30th of March or 31st of March in 2030. And then there's the preparation, as I say, for life after COLAS. And that is a big piece of work, because obviously, as you can imagine, managing the highways assets, which are being done by COLAS at the moment through their Walton Road office, what that looks like going forward, whether it be something similar or a DLO or whatever that might be, we need to manage that and prepare for that well. I mentioned we're working with the DFT. There is a part of the DFT is actually called the PFI Expiry Team, and that leads on networking and collaboration for with organisations like ourselves. It includes so other local authorities, the IPA, as I mentioned, local partnerships, national highways, UK Infrastructure Bank as well as in there. There's regular meetings on Teams and in person, and networking events, which myself and my colleagues are taking an active part in. The resources, we need sort of a couple of elements of resourcing. We need resourcing for the business as usual, so that's a team that exists at the moment, and I'm working with Councillor Stagg in resourcing up that team. And then there is the resources required for managing that post-PFI piece as well. And I know 7 years seems a long time away, and but that will go past really, really quickly. Post-2030, probably have talked enough about that, so ignore that. And in terms of governance, yeah, I'm obviously working very closely with the portfolio lead for traffic and transportation. We'll set up an executive board, and that will include the cabinet member, and there'll be an officer board and a steering group, obviously including council's Section 151 officer and the new director of regeneration, who will manage the sort of day-to-day progression. And I'll be bringing papers back to cabinet, showing you a timeline of how we're going to go through these next 7 years and what we're going to achieve and when.
Thanks very much indeed, Martin.
Thank you.
Lynn.
Thank you. Martin's really explained it all thoroughly, and I'd like to thank him for the amount of work because he's already put in. And I think people don't realise what a massive contract it is. I remember looking at it once, not in detail, just looking at the outside. It was in a folder, there were two of them, and they were about 3 inches thick. And that was just full of masses and masses of information. So there's a heck of a lot of work to be done. And one of the things I want to stress is that we haven't got the staffing at the moment. I mean, transport, I mean, I know lots of departments are understaffed. Transport is understaffed by between 20 and 25%. And these are specific, you know, this is an infrastructure area in particular. And you have to have, there's business as usual, which will be going on in the next 2 years and the 5 years after that in the actual rundown beforehand back. but there's also all the work to be done in doing that preparation for the handing back and then post PFI, because people have been used to everything being done. Colas does it. You know, if you want something done, Colas does it. Who's going to do it after that? And that's got to be put in place. And we need staff to do that. And that means, you're not going to like this, Chris, but it's going to involve money, okay, funding. And it's important that it is funded properly, because we want to hand back that contract and have the state of our roads and our assets as specified in that contract and not below that level. So it's a very important piece of work. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Martin, my only comment would be, it's absolutely right the portfolio holder is there at this, but I think it's useful to have a second pair of ears from the Cabinet as well. So a second member, because I know Susie has been doing an incredibly good job, and I don't know, we won't know who's doing what after May, but it would be useful if that sort of learning we can take through into this as well. Okay, thanks folks. With that slight addition, is everybody happy with this? Lovely, thanks. Emergency preparedness, resilience, response. Laura, thank you very much for your enormous patience waiting all this time. Anything you want to add to the report?
Thank you, Leader. Nothing particular to add to the report other than to say this is the stuff that excites me. The service was created in 2018, and that was pre-pandemic, pre-EU exit planning, and I think it's proved itself to be a good decision at the time. As a service, we've thrived creating a effective business model for generating income and a more robust and resilient service for responding to all manner of incidents. So the request that this report is seeking is to extend the service for another 5 years with Southampton City Council.
Okay, thanks. Jason?
Gosh, that was quick. I didn't even indicate I was going to speak, but thank you. Well, what can one say apart from to reiterate and also to say how much this makes sense in a number of ways. I mean, not at least professionally, but also financially, as the report details. I think it's true to say Laura's relatively new in post as head of the service, but has had prior experience to that. And whilst I've only had this portfolio for a year, she's been very good at keeping me updated. And I think it makes great sense because Portsmouth and Southampton share many similarities. Obviously, both port cities, both unitaries. So it's sensible that we work together. And a number of cases I think we've seen as members across the last year, and even prior to that, Nelson in particular has had a number of cases of gas explosions and a fire and some deaths back in Grafton Street not too long ago. In fact, there was even a fire at the weekend in Southsea. And again, the information comes to us relatively quickly. So I thank her and her colleagues for that. So I'm happy to accept the report, and I think it makes great sense, and long may we continue another 5 years after the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Lee?
Yeah, I remember when COVID was first creeping out of China, and I pulled the emergency planning team together with other senior council officers, and we started briefing members. And I think that made sure that we had a coordinated and logical response to what was going to occur over up until now. So emergency planning very much to do with that. And of course, they also oversee any nuclear submarines hanging around the channel, probably not the Russian ones, but anyway. So, and they are a good team, and as Councillor Zackley's mentioned, the work that they've done in ensuring that, so for example, and with Joe Bennett, of course, you know, in Nelson Ward, we've had these disasters, as it were, the Nelson Avenue and Grafton Streets, and they very, very key in making sure that residents were quickly looked after at the community centres, and we, you know, they were there before even us, which is something, I must admit. So I'm enormously grateful for the team and glad to see that we work so well with Southampton. And I know the feedback from there, because I had the portfolio before Jason, the feedback from there is very good too. So thanks to everybody. And just sharing these resources is such a good thing to do.
Thanks very much indeed. Colleagues, you happy with... Steve, do you want to talk?
Yes, very briefly, Leader, just because obviously during that pandemic period, along with yourself, I was in all those gold meetings, and I know the huge value that this service has. I think they do an excellent job. I think we get real benefit from the partnership with Southampton, and it gives real synergies between the two cities, and I just want to place on record my thanks to Laura and the team.
Okay. Colleagues, you happy with the report? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, over the page, Climate Change a Year in Review. Christina.
Thank you, Leader. Hello again, everyone. So today I bring an information report to Cabinet that we've coined a Climate Change a Year in Review. And it describes all the actions that Portsmouth City Council have taken to address climate change since the last municipal year ended, I think that's the right term, in last March 2022. So this type of information and the impacts that we've detailed in here will, going forward, be detailed in the carbon action plans, which, however, in the short-term absence of these, we've collated them here to demonstrate all the significant efforts that not just PCC officers but councillors have undertaken since then as well. And you'll be pleased to know these carbon action plans are being ready for publication now. So this report is reasonably lengthy, so I won't describe every point in there as there are a significant number of them, but they are structured around our strategic priority areas across our operations, also within our sort of actions within the city as well, which matches up with the priorities described in the Climate Action Strategy, which was adopted by Cabinet last September. I haven't got a lot more to add on it, but I would like to draw to attention the significant positive engagement and partnerships that have grown within Portsmouth in the last year, notably the Hive, the University of Portsmouth, and also Shaping Portsmouth as well, who have all really helped in sharing the responsibility of climate change leadership here within the city. It's been very well received.
Thank you. Kimberly.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased this report is here today because it's just 4 pages of loveliness in my mind and 4 pages of good news stories. How Christina and colleagues haven't passed out because you can see all the good work that they've been doing over the last year. It just goes to show here. Significant work has been going on across all of our portfolios in this council. We've been very keen since my cabinet role came into fruition that we didn't want to be siloed anymore, and we wanted to make sure that we were all working collegiately together, and this really just goes to show the amazing work we're doing across all our portfolios, across all sectors of the council as well. So I hope colleagues and all officers involved are really proud of this. It's a really big step forward, and you can really see the amount of money that we've been able to gain from different funding, the amount of money we're still putting into all these different things across the council, and where we're aiming to go, because we have that really big target to hit by 2030. It's very ambitious and quite scary at times, but this just goes to show exactly what we're doing across the council. And as Christina has said, you know, we've got these amazing partnerships across the city as well, where we're sharing work, sharing ideas, and seeing how we can move forward. And we're also supporting other organisations. We can obviously get certain funding for ourselves, others we can't. But what we can encourage is to support other groups, other organisations who may be able to attain funding but weren't sure how to do that. So some of the events we've had with the Hive have been quite successful in, you know, at least making sure that people are aware of that as well. So fantastic work. I'm so pleased to see this going forward. Well done, Christina. Well done, all the officers across all the different departments as well. If this is what's happened this year, I can't wait to be sitting here hopefully next year and having an even bigger list to speak about. So well done, everyone.
Thanks very much. Lee?
Look, when we first came into administration, this particular administration, and for all the right reasons, we were beset by critics who were telling us that City Council wasn't doing enough around climate change, green issues, trees, a whole range of issues. And they came to our cabinet. But you know, we didn't get cross with them. We listened to them. And as a result of what they were saying, we knew we made this a priority anyway, but we knew what we had to get on with. And you don't hear those voices now nearly much at all. Why? Because Kimberly, when we created the cabinet post for her to do her job and brought in officers to support her, has shifted that particular issue up numerous gears. And I could go on and list everything in the report. I'm sure people can see it. But also under your leadership, Gerald, too, no matter what happens, you know, things like shore-to-ship power. This was a tremendous achievement by you talking to the various companies and to the port to make these things happen. We were determined that that would happen, and the budgeting that we did allowed and enabled it to happen. And again, working with the port, who have been incredibly fantastic about being a champion for climate change and the green agenda here in Portsmouth. But we could go on through Lynn and the electrification of the entire fleet of Portsmouth buses in due course. We could talk about schools with Susie and all the solar panels on top of all of our buildings. I can't remember how many gigawatts of power that they produce, enormous amount of energy. I think feeding something like 2,500 homes. Incredible achievements, you know, and then we're going to go on and look at the food waste, and we're going to do a anaerobic digester, and we're changing the contract around collecting waste. And I know people are frustrated about collecting waste, but at least Kimberley has got a stopgap measure there around all the plastics that people were frustrated that they couldn't put into their green bins. And we go on to bottles and glass and all these other things. This tremendous work that's being done. I mean, it has been a huge change in the approach of the Portsmouth City Council. And I think there's no question about it. It is thanks largely to the approach and the prioritisation of this administration. So, and the officers who backed us to do that, and may I say, for every very good reason.
Thanks, Lee. People, are you happy with the report, to say thank you for it and to adopt it? Thank you very much indeed. Finally, Caroline, support for the Armed Forces families. Anything you'd like to add to the report?
No, this is just to say it's a noting report. It's an update on our affiliation discussions. It's worth noting that it's not just for discussion with the Royal Navy, but also with other key stakeholders such as Naval Families Federation, and that a core focus is not being about ceremony, but a focus on tangible support to that community. And that includes improving our communication with them, ensuring that they know what's available to them, and looking at how we can improve their access to local activities and our local offer, including housing.
Thanks. It seemed to me when we lost the affiliation to HMS Endurance that we needed to think about this and think about this in a different way, because we're not like Leeds or Bradford or places like that, Liverpool. We don't have the Navy just coming in for a parade once a year. This is people's home. This is where the Navy is based, and therefore our role is different, and it's about the support we can give to families of people who work in the Armed Forces and the Navy, and that means that we're going to do something a bit different, which I think is great, and to look at ways in which we can support families when their service member is on deployment, so that people get some support with looking after the kids. Being suggested we do a day at the Panto just for naval families, so that when people go there with people that they know and feel more secure, and maybe a summer fun day, but also thinking about how we support families getting into schools when people are moved from place to place at short notice, and when our schools are quite full, that the really rubbish housing situation for service families, and what we can do to help. And we've been asked to provide counsellors to support the Navy when they do their surgeries twice a year in each of the naval housing estates, and I'm sure we will be happy to support them, and I'm very pleased the police have said so as well. So I think there's lots more that we can do. Very grateful for the report, and it means that we've got some work to do and to implement but extend as well. So thanks, Caroline. Got it, Matthew.
Thank you, and I'd just like to thank Caroline for the report, and Gerald as our elected Armed Forces champion, as he's been for the last few years. as representative of one of the wards with some of the remaining naval married quarters in it, together with Hilsey, which are the two main ones, and also some in Drayton and Farlington. In Eastern Craneswater, we have that thing day to day. So the work that goes on with our families down in Eastney, but then also are peppered across the city, is absolutely critical. And we do know about the vulnerability of everything. We know that I was actually at a thing for work yesterday where one of the mental health liaison with service families was talking about the fact that there's a few ships coming in for a short period of time, and then after Easter you've got people on deployment for 4 to 6 months, and that's the reality of naval families all the time. That is a normal thing, and you can imagine what it's like having a parent, a partner away from you for 4 to 6 months at a time, and that happens on a regular basis, which is why the work we're doing is so important, and that renewal, and always looking for better ways to do that. But also we have to remember it's not just Navy. We do have other, we have the Marines, of course, part of the Navy, but in separate things. And we also have other armed forces personnel who live in the city as well. Indeed, I was canvassing, so I was delivering to Esplanade Gardens in my ward, which is entirely made up of naval housing, and I found someone from the army squatting there, which surprised me greatly. But he's on to comment to the naval base, and so there are the same things there that you've got. So that's why this is obviously our focus is on the Navy, but we do also have our other armed forces families, plus of course the families who live in Portsmouth whose family members are in the Army, are in the Air Force, etc., etc., and they are as much part of our commitment under the Armed Forces Covenant and all the work we do to support service families. So thanks so much for the report, and thank you to everyone for all the work they do.
Thank you. I think we take our responsibility very seriously. We are the home of the Royal Navy. That means that we are different from other places, and I think we do work hard to try to support naval families and other forces families, and we'll continue to do that. Colleagues, are you happy with this report? Thank you very much indeed. That means that this meeting is now finished. As this is the last scheduled meeting of this municipal year, can I record my thanks to everybody who's been on the Cabinet, and particularly to Lynn, who is not standing for re-election and therefore won't be on the Cabinet from May onwards. So can I formally record my thanks, Lynn, for all your work over many years, but to everybody who's been involved, both officers and members, and wish you well for the next few weeks. Thank you. Anna the Button, like Bernie the Bolt. I remember Bernie the Bolt.